Hello and welcome back to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this episode is for UFC Fight Night, Hernandez versus Pereira. We'll just get into it. The fight card started off super shitty. We start off with Lane versus Despaigne. 30-27. I had this 30-27 to Lane. This fight essentially was two fighters who can't strike. I don't care what you feel about Despaigne. Two fighters who can't strike. And Lane getting a takedown each round because Despaigne can't stop a takedown. Just a horrible fight. And I'm thankful this was the first fight of the night, because if it were anything sandwiched in the middle, this fight card could have been ruined. This fight card started off from being super shitty and progressively got better. It was amazing. I mean, we had, I think off the top of my head, 4 women's fights. Right? Am I looking at that correctly? No. We had 3 women's fights that were 20 billion times better than this first fight. Okay, let's get back to the first fight. Lane versus Despaigne, 30-27. I had this 30-27. In the first round, Lane had a takedown with a little bit of ground and pound. I'm being generous when I say a little bit of ground and pound. I mean, we can call it ground and pound up until the end, but very little ground and pound for about 2+ minutes. In the second round, Despaigne outstruck Lane on the feet by about 2 strikes. He was outstriking him by literally 2 strikes. But Lane had a takedown to close out the round. It's funny. He's losing on the feet, barely. He gets it to the ground finally, where he proceeds to land. I don't even want to call it ground, but to call it ground and pound is an insult to the name ground and pound. He lands almost nothing on the ground, but he gets the takedown. So you kind of give him the round. He didn't get outstruck that heavily on the feet. You give him the round. I wouldn't be mad. I think the round goes to Lane, but I wouldn't be mad if someone gave it to Despaigne, honestly. But I give the round to Lane. You go to the third round where Lane gets a takedown with some ground and pound for about 2+ minutes. And there you have it, 30-27. You go to the judges' scorecards. And I was correct. All 3 judges, Hadley V Jr., Camijo, and Brian Piccolo, have it 29-28 for Lane. They give the second round to Despaigne. I guess they just didn't. They didn't care about the takedown at the end, because obviously he didn't do anything there. But I'm fine with it. Whatever. You can argue for either person. You get to the next honorable mention, and this is probably the most interesting fight on the card in terms of the scorecards. Martinez versus Ardelean. I had this 29-28 for Ardelean. First 2 rounds for Ardelean, last round for Martinez. This was another classic example of optics ruining the fight. This fight essentially is Martinez running it down, circling the cage, point fighting. And when I say point fighting is being generous. She's point fighting while missing the majority of her strikes, landing 1 strike at a time while getting outstruck. That's essentially what this fight was. And the reason why this fight is a robbery in my eyes, it's kind of, there's 2 robberies really, because Martinez should have won by TKO in the 3rd round if it weren't for the mistake by Keith Peterson. And then, because this went to the scorecards, Ardelean should have won via the scorecards. She was winning the first 2 rounds. She's winning the first 2 rounds. The strike numbers indicate she's winning the first 2 rounds. And yet, for some weird reason, the judges just, they just weren't, they were just admiring the circling of the cage by Martinez. Let's go to the first round. So in the first round, Ardelean barely outstrikes Martinez. So if you want to make a point here, if you want to say, okay, look, by your strike numbers, David, she outstruck her by 2 strikes. Okay, maybe you can flip the round for Martinez here. But again, I have it. Ardelean barely outstruck Martinez by 2 strikes. In the second round, she outstrikes her by 4 strikes. A lot more clear. Another noticeable thing in this entire fight, this whole fight is disgusting. I truly believe Ardelean won this fight. I have no stake in either person. In the second round, not even in the second round, go back to the first round. In the first round and the second round, Martinez's corner is screaming at the top of their lungs after every strike that is thrown by Martinez, whether it lands or not, the majority of them not landing, the majority of them being whiffed, the majority of them being parried, the majority of them being blocked. Her corner is politicking heavy for every single Martinez strike, and I personally think that it worked. It got to the judges and it worked. You go to the third round, which is really the only round I think that's clear for Martinez. Martinez dropped Ardelean, and she outstruck her on the feet. So this should have been a TKO. It wasn't because of just bad reffing, but it should have been a TKO. The winner should be Martinez, but it shouldn't be because it goes to the scorecards where Ardelean should have won. It's the weirdest. It's really one of the weirdest things. We go to the scorecards, and every single judge, Mike Bell, Ron McCarthy, Tony Weeks, honorable mention all three. This is fucking terrible. It's terrible. All three of them give Martinez a 30-27. It makes me really wonder what the fuck we're watching, because she's getting outstruck for 2 rounds, and we don't even get a 29-28. We don't even get a split decision. We get all unanimous because of just a really bad fight overall. Just a really, really, really bad fight overall. We'll move on. Next honorable mention is Penne versus Reed. I had this 30-27 for Reed. If you go to the first round, Reed outstruck Penne mostly in the clinch. In the second round, Reed outstruck Penne, this time by 29 plus strikes. This was her best round. Not really. This was when she was flowing, really. And then in the third round, she outstruck Penne again, but this time by 35 plus strikes. You go to the judges' scorecards, and even the commentary was making a point that because Penne was being held to the fence in the first round, that round, excuse me, because Reed was being held to the fence in the first round by Penne, that's what gave her the first round. This is just bad. I just want to point out something. If this were a men's fight, we wouldn't score it this way. If a male fighter was being held to the cage, and he is the most offensive person in the clinch, we give him the round. Why all of a sudden, because they're female fighters? Let me explain this. In that first round, Penny's getting outstruck, and then when she brings it to the fence, to the cage, in the clinch, while she's throwing knees, a lot of them not really landing, very few of them I want to add, she's being outstruck in the clinch. She's being outworked and outstruck in the clinch by Reed. Yet, all 3 judges, honorable mention all 3, Adelaide Bird, Derek Cleary, and Ron McCarthy, all 3 of them give that first round to Penne. It's just, sometimes none of this makes sense. The scoring makes no sense. And this isn't a situation where I'm going, change the scoring system. The scoring system is fine. What is this philosophy? She's being outstruck in the clinch, and yet she still gets the round. All 3 of them have it for Penne 29-28. All 3 of them have it for Reed at 29-28. You go to the next honorable mention, and it's Hadley versus Smotherman. The moment this fight started, I knew it was bad for Hadley, given that first of all, given that Smotherman is just smothering Hadley. But you know what's funny about this is he wasn't really smothering Hadley. He was pushing. He was the aggressor. He controlled the octagon. He was pushing the pace. But if there's one noticeable thing about this fight is that they were both missing like a lot. And I feel like a lot, like they whiffed on like all of their strikes for the first 10 minutes. and we were just watching. For the first 10 minutes, they're just whiffing on everything, and I'm sitting here going, "What? This fight is dead up until around the third round." So you go to the first round. If I can find it here on my little ticker, you go to the first round. I'm sorry, before we even get to it, 29-27. Okay, first round for Smotherman, last round for Smotherman. Second round, the second round to Hadley. Hadley kind of comes back at the end of the round after he gets pointed. But second round for Hadley, it was going to be a 10-9, but he gets pointed for an eye poke. Personally, I don't think they should have pointed him, but that's beyond the point. So instead of it being a 10-9 for Hadley, it becomes a 9-9, making it 29-27. You go to the first round. You go to that very first round, and Smotherman outstrikes Hadley on the feet by about 5 strikes. In the second round, Hadley barely outstrikes Smotherman. He's kind of slightly being outstruck when the eye poke happens, and then once the point is administered, he essentially outstrikes Smotherman. And then in that third round, Smotherman outstrikes Hadley by about 10 plus strikes. So you go to the judges' scorecards, and where, if I can find it here, you go to the judges' scorecards, and only 2 judges really get it right. Derek Cleary and Ben Cartledge, they're scoring correct. They both have 29-27. Their scorecards reflect mine, where they give the round to Hadley in the second round, and then they administer the point. Adelaide Bird is just not locked in, and so she has a 30-26. She gives the second round to Smotherman, and then gives the point deduction, making it a 10-8. So honorable mention to Adelaide Bird, just fucking ridiculous shit. We go to the next honorable mention, and that's the main event, which was, even though it was a one-way domination, it was very entertaining to watch, and just goes to show that Pereira is essentially a one-trick pony, and also a Minuteman, because he has no cardio. Now, that might not be the best thing to say, given that he is being smothered, right? He is being smothered for basically 4 rounds or 5 rounds in a row. So maybe the cardio thing doesn't add up, but I think it slightly adds up, given that he's kind of juggling through weights, right? He fought at welterweight for a while. He was too big for welterweight. Then now he fights at middleweight. He might be too muscly for middleweight, if that's even if that's even a thing. I understand it's a 5-round fight, so he had to pace himself, but the commentary made it seem like in the first round he went crazy like he usually does. He looked very, very tame in the first round in comparison to what he usually looks like in the first round of 3-round fights, but it makes sense that he was tame, because if he went crazy on Hernandez, he probably loses just maybe a lot quicker, maybe. Not maybe loses a lot quicker, but he probably gets taken down a lot more earlier than he did in the first round. So it makes sense that he played it a little bit cautious. But I was surprised that he gassed out. I mean, we've seen many fights where people get wrestled for 5 rounds, and they don't gas out the way Pereira did. Pereira gassed out pretty much after round 1. The moment round 1 ended, and he just got taken down once, the moment round 1 ended, he looked gone. He looked like it was over. I had a 10-9 for the first 2 rounds to Hernandez, and then a 10-8 for round 3 and round 4 for Hernandez as well, and the TKO finish goes in the 5th round. You go to the first round, where Hernandez had a takedown with some ground and pound. He also outstruck Pereira on the feet by about 6 strikes. In the second round, Pereira had a submission attempt. It wasn't really locked in, but it's still a submission attempt. It was locked in for like a moment, really. And he also had a reversal, but Hernandez had 2 takedowns with ground and pound, and he outstruck Pereira on the feet by about 8 strikes. And then in the third round, this is where we get into 10-8 territory. Hernandez had 2 takedowns with ground and pound, and outstruck Pereira on the feet by about 7 strikes. But essentially, this entire round was 0 offense from Pereira, all offense for Hernandez. Possible 10-8, I gave the 10-8. And then Hernandez had 3 takedowns with ground and pound and outstruck Pereira on the feet. He outstruck him on the feet by 7 strikes, but it was just the ground and pound is the noticeable affect. I hope I used that word correctly. Is the noticeable thing in this round. And then another possible 10-8, I gave it 10-8. You go to the judges' scorecards. And Ben Cartledge, his scorecard reflects mine, except for round 4. He gives a 10-9 for round 4. I think this round is more dominant than round 3. Again, I think there's less ground and pound in this round in comparison to round 3, but whatever. Ron McCarthy, his scorecard is it reflects mine, except he gives a 10-8 in the second round instead of the third and the fourth. That one's a little. I disagree with that. First of all, honorable mention. That's fucking stupid. It makes no sense because Pereira had a submission attempt and he had a reversal. There's enough action in this second round to warrant off the 10-8. It's a stupid 10-8. It's an absolutely stupid 10-8. So honorable mention there. That's ridiculous. And then he gives a 10-9 for the next 2 rounds. So whatever. I'll just leave that alone. And then Derek Cleary just has the worst scorecard, one of the worst scorecards of the night. He gives the first round to Pereira. I don't understand how you give the first round to Pereira. Now, maybe it's because he hurt him with the leg kick. Kick to the body. That kind of stuns. Hernandez for the moment. But regardless, he continues to then outstrike Pereira and then take him down. It's a stupid scorecard regardless. Honorable mention there. And then even more stupidity. He gives the second round a 10-8 for Hernandez. More stupidity. And then he gives the rest a 10-8. So whatever. Just honorable mention Derek Cleary. It's a bad scorecard. And that's it. That's the end of it. I'm going to go watch UFC 308. And hopefully that's a good card. Thank you all for listening. And God bless.